Today, we have got the huge pleasure of welcoming Jackie Grannell to speak to us today about the important topic of customer engagement and involvement. Thank you, Jackie, for being with us. Jackie has 35 years experience in the housing sector across multiple different areas, including housing management, leasehold, regeneration, project management. She's also a celebrated learning and development coach, and for the last 20 years has also been working as a housing consultant and an independent tenant advisor. Don't know where she gets the time to do all of this stuff, but she does, and she does it well. Jackie brings her knowledge and experience in resident engagement involvement to us today for what is a very, very timely subject for housing professionals. So if it's okay for me to do so, Jackie, I will hand over to you.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. When you feed back what's happened over 35 years of a career, then I just think, well, it must be time to retire, mustn't it? But apparently it's not, everybody. So I'm going to keep going. Good afternoon. It's very, very nice to be here. Thank you for the invite, Lindsay. I'm really grateful to be given the opportunity. I've got a slide deck which I will share with you. What I'm going to do is once we finish the webinar, I will make sure that a copy is sent to Lindsay as a PDF document, so that if any of you do want it, Lindsay perhaps can arrange for it to be sent out to you, so you've got it as a record of what's happened today. I'm going to talk to you for probably about 35 to 40 minutes. I know I can talk for longer, but I'm only going to go for the 35 to 40 minutes today. And then I thought at the end, we've then got the opportunity to for you to ask some questions, have a little bit of a discussion if you'd like to. And we can also answer any questions that are put in the chat as well. So if as I'm going on, you think, I wish I'd like to know the answer to, put it in the chat and we'll see if we can cover it, if that's okay. So let's hope the technology works. I'm going to press the buttons and I'm going to share some slides with you. I've lost them. Oh dear. No, I haven't. Here they are. There they are. Look at that.
Got them.
Right. Lindsay, thumbs up. Is that showing on the screen? So I know. That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm Jackie Grannell. I'm an independent housing consultant and trainer. I work for a couple of different businesses as well as my own organisation. One of the two principal organisations I work for currently as an associate are Altair and TPAS, and I'm there as their specialist in customer engagement and involvement. So what do you want to learn today, and what do I want to do with you today? I want to cover three things with you today. I want to explore with you the reasons why we have to do tenant or customer engagement. I want you to think about and try and think about your organisations, how customers can actually be involved, whatever that means. Crikey, what does that mean? Let's have a think about that as well. And to consider what customers might want about being involved. Do they want to make a difference? Do they really want to make a difference to your housing organisations? I'm going to use the term tenant, customer, resident interchangeably throughout this presentation, because they're all the same to me. They are the people who live in your homes, who have some form of contractual and financial relationship with you. So they either have a tenancy agreement, they have a license, a leasehold agreement, or a shared ownership arrangement with you. They are customers and tenants, and that is who this is aimed at. This is what this session is about. It's the people who live in your homes and who receive those services. So one of the things, you know, on your CPD, when you're having to think about, well, what do I need to take back from this and reflect on? I'd like you to go back and think about, what does my organisation call the people who live in our homes? Do we identify them as tenant, as customers, as residents? What's the word that we use? What's our culture, in other words? I don't know what you do and don't know, so I'm going to start with some of the basics here. The social landlord business in England, and it's the English version that I'm talking about here. It's the powers around housing are devolved to the Scottish government and to the Welsh government. So anything I talk about in terms of legislation or regulation is what applies to the English housing sector. So the social landlord business in England, that's local authorities, councils and housing associations, they're not free to do what they want. They can't just do whatever they like. There are huge amounts of legislation that define what they can and what they can't do. So that's housing legislation, various housing acts, rent acts, fire safety, building safety acts. All of those things are pressing in on the business about what it can and what it can't do. And then you add health and safety, unemployment legislation, and financial legislation, and all of that. These are rules. They're there to protect people, and they're really important that your business complies with that law. The organisation also has to comply with very specific codes of practice. So for you, as members of CIH and working with CIH, you'll have a code of practice around how you operate as a professional in the housing sector. Other colleagues in your organisation will have codes of practice around their service delivery as well. We have codes of practice about how we're regulated. So we have to comply with those. So that's pressing in on us as a business. And then you have the regulatory requirements. You should be familiar with the RSH, the Regulator of Social Housing. And in the 1st of April of this year, everything changed for our sector because a new piece of legislation, the 2023 Act, the Regulation Act, was passed into law. So your organisations are free to do certain things, but they have to do it within the confines of all of these codes of practice, law and regulation. You have to be a legally compliant business, legally compliant financially and legally compliant in respect of the safety and how your homes are presented to residents. You have to be financially secure, especially if you're a housing association, and you have to be able to demonstrate that your residents, your customers, are subject to service standards that are measurable and achievable and that keep them safe in their homes. So the business has to think really big and really wide and strategic about what we need to do best. So on the 1st of April 2024, the law changed. Now, here's the bit. Shh, don't tell anybody. I'm going to share a secret with you. Okay. So we've had regulation of this form, consumer and economic standards, since 2012. So it's kind of not new. But what has changed is that from the 1st of April 2024, those consumer standards, the ones on the left-hand side of the screen, they used to be a bit sort of, oh, well, you know, if we meet them, it'll be okay. But now you have to meet them. There's a piece of law that says you have to meet them. You have always had to meet as a housing association. So for those of you who work for housing associations, you've always had to meet the economic standards on the right hand side of your screen, and you've had to demonstrate that you comply with those, and you could have board members imposed on your organisation if you hadn't met those standards. That's been around since 2012, but the big shift is the change in the consumer standards, the services to our customers, the services to the people who live in our homes. There are 4 standards, and they're there listed on the screen for you. The one that's the best one, if anybody asks me, it's the one highlighted in bold, the Transparency, Influence and Accountability Standard. I think you need to think of this as the one that is the golden thread. It ties all the others together. So it doesn't operate on its own. It has to operate by tying together the safety and quality standard, neighbourhood and community, and the tenancy standard. And it also has to link back to governance and viability. So these standards are a significant change in how we have to report on them and demonstrate our compliance with these standards. So the rules now say, and I've taken this from the Regulator of Social Housing's document, lots of words on there, but the landlords have to make sure all their homes are safe and decent, and you've got to provide quality services. You've got to handle complaints effectively. You have to listen. That's the big word in that sentence. Listen to tenants and support them to influence decisions. They are the decisions that are made by the board of the housing association or the cabinet of the council, the committee of the council. You've got to demonstrate through the behaviours and the culture of the organisation that there is a shared expectation around fairness and respect. and that everybody understands that we all have rights and responsibilities. We do as landlords, and customers do as tenants, leaseholders, shared owners, whatever their agreement might be. And we have to demonstrate, and this has been there since 2012, that we understand the diverse needs of the communities in which you operate. So, little bit of reflection, write this one down for you to have a little think about. What's the diversity of the communities in which your landlord operates? Which particular protected characteristics and groups do you see more of or less of? Whose voice aren't you hearing? Whose voice is not being heard often enough by the landlord? Who's missing from our information and our data? So just have a little think about that when you're away from here, about who are our customers? How diverse are they? Do I know how diverse they are and what difference that might be? The law protects 9 characteristics, but I'd also like you to think about diversity and add a few more onto that. So perhaps you could add onto that something like those who are economically challenged. It's not a protected characteristic, but it's worth thinking about. You may have families that live in your properties where they have 2 or 3 jobs, but not very well paid jobs, and they're still managing to pay the rent, and they're still being fantastic tenants and customers. But there might be a struggle there because of the economic circumstances that they're particularly facing. Disability is a protected characteristic, but your tenant might not be the one who's registered disabled, but they might be caring for another family member who is. A young person perhaps, or an older relative, you just don't know. So I want you to just think a bit wider about that idea of what diversity means. Lots of words on here. I'm not going to read them all out, but the consumer regulation actually says, and when you get the slide, you can take all these away. The very quick summary is that you've got to understand as an organisation whether the culture, how we operate as an organisation, is enabling the voice of tenants and customers to be heard and to be understood. If you look at that 3rd bullet point, it says there what we have to do. It says that boards and councillors have to genuinely consider those views and experiences when they make decisions, which will mean making sure they get the right evidence and information from their executive teams. So we can't just take the word of a few tenants. We've got to build up our data and our understanding of who lives in our homes, and what they feel about our services and how well we're delivering those services. And the final bullet point is that we've got to have a model of engagement and involvement that is right for their tenants. So for your tenants, the people that you're looking after, that's right for them and right for the geography of your organisation. So I don't know who you work for. Some of you might work for a landlord that has a national basis, so they have housing stock all over the UK. Some of you might work for an organisation that operates within one local authority area. What works for one may not work for another. What the regulations say is we've got to have a model that suits our organisation. So I would like you to, again, this is another thing you need to do, go away and have a look at, you don't already know, what's our engagement framework in our organisation? What does it look like now? Is anything happening with it? Are we reviewing it? Remember I told you the one I like most out of those 4 standards? Here it is, everybody. Hooray! It's the transparency, influence and accountability standard. You can find much more detail about this from the RSH website, but I've listed them there for you. There are 7 outcomes that are expected. Can you see again? Oh, look, she keeps repeating it. The diverse needs to take action to deliver fair access to and equitable outcomes of housing and landlord services for all tenants. Take tenants' views into account. Number 3, take tenants' views into account in their decision making about how landlord services are delivered. So remember, this is not why we do engagement. Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? We're doing engagement because we're being told to do it. But it makes really good business sense to do engagement. It's as simple as that. No business would run their organisation without understanding what their customers want or what their customers need or what their customers expect. And it should be no different to our sector as well. So the regulator of social housing has a way of monitoring and checking on how we work, and they use this approach, which is called co-regulation. So this is my very simple diagram of how co-regulation works. So at the bottom you can see in the blue box, external regulation by the regulator of social housing. They set those minimum standards, and they're going to use these things called TSMs. That acronym stands for Tenant Satisfaction Measures. They will be reported publicly for all English housing associations and English local authorities in the autumn of this year. So we'll get a league table of what's going on and how customers feel about the services they're receiving. A bit like Ofsted, this regulator, though, wants to know how you're doing as a business. And what it's going to do is ask how well you're doing in terms of your governance by the board or by the council, how you involve customers, and how tenants and customers have been able to scrutinise in detail the services that you provide. So if you think of those three things, governance, involvement, scrutiny, as a three-legged stool, it needs the three legs because it will fall over without them. And they are different, but they all coexist together. And if they work well together, you can demonstrate customer involvement is having an influence on the decisions that the organisation is making. Today, though, is really about that thing of involvement. What's involvement? It all sounds very easy, doesn't it? And I've worked in involvement a really long time, and I'll share it with you now, shall I? But don't tell anybody what I'm telling you, because it's a big secret, this. Resident involvement is quite hard. It's really quite hard. You have to work hard at it. You have to plan about it. You have to think about it. What you can't do is, if you're a head of service, you can't run into the involvement team and go, oh, you know, all that regulation that's currently happening, I've just realised I need to talk to some tenants. Have you got any tenants sort of hiding in the office that I can talk to now? Well, no, because that's not how it works, is it? We have to think and plan and think longer term about how we involve customers. And there are some key words that are often used. Now, here's another bit of reflection for you. The words that I have written on here: inform, consult, decide, monitor, influence. Those words will be used in documents that your organisation has produced in respect of strategies for involvement and engagement, around policies. They'll all be in there, these words, but words have meaning behind them. And these words have very specific actions behind them. Now, you think you know what they mean, but sometimes people write the word, but they don't do the right action. So if I was doing this as a training course, we'd spend a little while and we'd have post-it notes and we'd all decide what these words mean. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you the answers. So on this next slide, you'll see the answers. Inform. That's not difficult, is it? That's just telling people stuff. And that's really important. Most human beings can easily make a decision for themselves if you give them accurate, up-to-date, unbiased information. They can make choices. Think about a menu in a restaurant. If they describe to you what the food is going to look like, what herbs or spices are used, whether it has meat in it, whether it's with a meat substitute, you will look at that menu and think, excellent, that's the choice for me. You didn't need somebody to help you with that because the information was in front of you. So it's really important we get accurate, good quality, relevant information out to our residents through websites, in letters, newsletters, posters, SMS messaging, Facebook, all of those things. Good, accurate information. It's really important. It's the basis of many things. The next word, consult, is the one where I get myself in a bit of a tiz about, because this is the one where somebody says, well, I've consulted the tenants, I've consulted the residents. You say, well, what did you do? Well, I went to a meeting and I told them that. You see, that's not consulting them, is it? That's informing them. Don't get me wrong, sometimes people need information, but if you are genuinely consulting, you go with an idea and then you say, well, I'm not sure if it's even the right idea, but it's the starting point. What would you add to this or take away from this? Then I'll go away and do some more work and I'll come back with you with the next iteration of this document or this project. That's consultation. The voice of people is heard and informs the process. We then have a way that tenants should be able to decide. So if you do a good consultation, you should have evidence written down that says, we did a consultation and we decided, landlord and tenant, that this was the best decision. So the decision might be, here's a foolish one from me, we might decide that your landlord's going to paint all of the front doors green. And you've done a consultation and it was agreed that that's what would happen. But what we need to do then, once we've made that decision, is monitor whether we've now got residents who are happier with the colour of their front doors. Why did we consult on the change of colour of front doors? Simply because we'd had some data and we had some information that said people didn't like the colour of the front doors. Bright pink was no good for us. They wanted a different colour. So when we changed and we did the consultation to green front doors, we now need to see, when we gather our surveys and we do our surveys, are residents happier with that? So we monitor that. And the influence has come about because residents were part of the consultation. You can report back to your board and your councillors about a process in which they were consulted, which they helped make a decision and which changed something. The monitoring meant tenants were much happier with the situation afterwards than before. So there's a line of sight from information to influence. That's how we need to do involvement. So I'm also not somebody who's going to be very bashful about this. I'll be honest with you. The vast majority of people who live in your organisation's homes are busy. They have jobs, they have families, they have lives. They don't want to come to meetings. They don't want to be involved, in the sense of they don't necessarily want to take part in things that are complex and difficult and take up time. It's not because they don't care, but it's because they have other things that matter. So what we have to do as organisations, and it's up to us who work in these organisations, is to have ways of enabling customers to be involved, but we use lots of different ways and different interactions with customers so that they have an opportunity to have their voice heard. That can be something as simple as responding to a repair survey. They've had a repair carried out. It could be that you gather them on an online group and ask them through the year just to give us some feedback. It might be that they've recently moved in and you're doing a project around the allocation process, and you might say to them, would you mind helping us out with a little bit of research? We need about 10 minutes of your time. We'll do it we'll do it as a virtual meeting. You don't have to come to an event, and we'll fit in around you. So perhaps we'll do that at 6 o'clock once you're in from work and we need 10 minutes. What you're doing is you are planning how to involve the right people in the right activities in the right way. Having meetings in community centres is really important, but for most people, if they're at work or busy, this is not a way of simply getting involved. We have to find other ways. There's brilliant technology around to help with all of this now. So another reflection point out of today for me would be, if you don't know already, why don't you go and find out from your own organisation? What are the ways and methods that we involve customers? There'll be surveys, for example, but do we have an online group? Do we have tenants and residents associations, for example? Just be curious and find out a little bit more about what is happening within your organisation. When we talk about meaningful and appropriate interactions, and I've covered some of these, but I've put some on here for you. You've got the opportunity. It's very old-fashioned. Someone said this to me last week on a training course, a newsletter, an actual newsletter on a piece of paper. Do you know, sometimes because we don't get very much through our letterboxes anymore, people are a bit surprised when they get posts through the door. They're a bit curious. So it may well be that a newsletter is absolutely the spot on thing you should be doing for your residents. Personalised letters, really important. Dear Sir, Madam, no, no, no. Dear Mrs. Jones, thank you for paying the rent, but we noticed this month that you missed a bit off it. Can we help you? What's going on? Really personalised. You address things to the people who live in the properties. Text messaging, any of you who are users of dental services or health services will know that if you have an appointment at the hospital or the dentist, you will often get a text message reminder. Hello, we're expecting you tomorrow for your appointment. Hope you can come along. We're looking forward to seeing you. It might also tell you that if you don't turn up, it's going to cost them £140 or something. But generally, it's we're looking forward to seeing you. These nudges, and that's what they call the right language, is really important about developing a good, positive relationship with your residents and your customers. Never underestimate the power of an email. Most people have an email address. So if you want to get some information out to residents, sometimes an email is a really quick and a really efficient way of doing it. And then we've got all the posh stuff, the QR codes, we've got satisfaction surveys, digital information screens. You might be using these if your organisation has a number of high-rise blocks. You may have those in there to advise around fire safety. That's where you might see digital information screens. The real old-fashioned face-to-face stuff, it is old-fashioned, but you know, it works. Walking about an estate. If you're a frontline housing officer or repair operative, or you work in the ASB team, for example, you know, just having a face on the estate, actually seeing what it's really like is really important. You cannot manage housing from an office. You need to go and see stuff. I love the idea of estate champions. This is where if you've got big estates to manage, you might have a group of residents who are your eyes and ears on the estate, helping you in your job to be better at your job. And it's a relationship of trust. This is fantastic involvement. And for some residents, it's exactly what they want to do. For quite a lot of them, it is not what they want to do. But unless you ask and you start to try and develop some of these things, it's never going to be happening and it's never going to be there as an opportunity. So where's our starting point? You need good quality data. And everything, and the regulator is telling us this, is organisations need to know stuff about their organisations, housing and its customers. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely they know where their properties are and what they've got. The evidence so far has shown that some landlords' data about their properties is not as up to date as it could be. So we're starting to see organisations doing full-scale external stock condition surveys, but they are also now getting access inside the properties to do surveys internally to see the condition of those homes. This links directly to the damp and mould issues that we're seeing in certain types of properties up and down the country. So the accurate data is what type of property this is and where it is. Is it 2 stories or 1 story? Is it 4 bedrooms or 1 bedroom? Is it in the middle of a village or the middle of a town? Is it near a main road? Is it high rise, low rise? What's it made from? Is it made from straw? Is it made from brick? These things are really, really important because they determine decisions about investment in that home and how, and certainly for damp and mould, how you might prevent damp and mould in that property. You need to know not just who lives there, but under what conditions do they live there? By that, I mean, what type of tenancy, what type of agreement do they live under? Because that's really important in terms of what actions you can or can't take and how you engage with people. Who lives in your property? Are there children in there? Young people? Is it an all-adult household? Does anybody have a disability or any other characteristic we need to be aware of? We should be looking at communication preferences. Some people will say, you don't need to send me anything, but I'm really happy for you to send me an email. So, you know, that's fine. Or keep me up to date with a text message. That's also a good way. that idea of communication preferences you'll be familiar with when you've signed up to any other website or service. You are asked at the point of signing up, how do you want to talk to us? How do you want to know about us? We have to do the same in housing as well. And then you have digital engagement. So engagement through portals on your website. You might have a tenant portal where they can access perhaps their own rent account, for example, or they can order repairs, or they can use a chatbot function, all of those sorts of things. I am starting to see, I don't have a great deal of information, but I'm starting to see organisations using AI as a way of understanding customer behaviour and what's happening in terms of customers. So things are changing. Be a bit curious. Go away and find out a bit more about what's going on in your organisation. Customer involvement is this really, really wide spectrum. And this is just one way of me being able to present this to you. So if you were going to put methods against these, so at the bottom is it the be aware, and that really is about the information. Remember, inform and consult, decide and monitor. Be aware is that information. And then you might have residents who want to opt into things like a specific group, an online group perhaps, or I will fill in a survey every 6 months for you. And then you have the chip in, which might be, I'll just fill in a survey when you send it to me. I don't want to be tied to anything, but if you send one, I'll fill it in. Co-creation and collaboration are about where you work in great depth with residents on designing a service or setting service standards or changing an approach to something. If you were working with an organisation who's doing estate regeneration, you would be co-creating and collaborating with a group of residents on that estate to develop the programme. And then finally, you have the lead, and the lead is, I should have shown the next slide, that makes it even better for you. The lead is around those who want to be involved formally, either through scrutiny panels, or perhaps even if you're a housing association, they may well be a member of your board. And that formal involvement is very different. It's a bigger commitment by the resident to the organisation. They're not elected generally by the rest of the resident body, but they are appointed by the organisation. So and that's a very, very formal way of being involved. But in reality, most people are on the I just want to be involved and be informed. What I tried to do on this diagram here, this is not a particular organisation, it's literally my made-up organisation. What I've tried to do, and it's a housing association example, so my apologies if you work for a local authority, but if you changed main board and put council housing committee, that's how this model would work. So when I'm working with organisations, for me, it's really simple. All customers are involved with an organisation at some point in time and in some shape or in some form, but they're involved in ways and at times and in places that suit them. What we have to do as housing professionals is start to identify how we can best deliver on that. It's not for residents just to tell us this stuff. We have to actively go out and find this stuff out for ourselves. What should happen is all of that involvement, all those different methods, and you may have more in here that you think we should be in here, they all come together, that data all comes together, that insight is around how people feel about services, data is the numbers, all of that information should be coming back to the main governance structure. Do you remember the three-legged stool? Scrutiny, involvement, governance. They are all tied together. So what we need to do, and what you need to do for the regulator, is to demonstrate that the voice of customers is heard and understood, their lived experience is heard and understood, and that the boards, when they are making a decision, or the council committee is making a decision about where to spend money, how to spend money, what to spend money on, it's informed by data and insight from what customers want and what customers expect. But remember all that legislation. There are some things you have to do because legislation trumps everything. So when boards and council committees are meeting, they are having to weigh up, what do we have to do? What does the law say we have to do? What are the expectations of our customers? And I think for me, one of the advantages of that spectrum model is that the vast majority of customers do want great quality, up-to-date, accurate information. So that means we have to think about how we communicate and how we make that communication effective and relevant. Boards make decisions not because boards and councils make the wrong decisions if the information they're presented with is incorrect, and customers make the wrong decisions if the information they are given is incorrect. So the reality of engagement is that the vast majority of customers just want lots and lots of information, accurate information. But that accurate information comes from those surveys and from that data and from that insight that you're gathering through customers through regular surveys, face-to-face meetings, events on estates, very specific consultations. You don't do involvement with every customer all the time, every day. What you need to understand is, what does our business need to do right now? How do we involve customers in this, and what methods are we going to use, and when will we know the answer? So my last slide for you, and then I'll happily take some questions and we can have a look at the chat, is I want you to go away from here and think about and look for your organisation's model or framework for tenant involvement and scrutiny. What does your organisation currently do? As a bit of an aside, have a look at some of the communications that are sent out to the customers. So have a look at rent letters, letters sent in respect of antisocial behaviour, repair appointment letters, gas service, appointments for gas servicing. Is it in a really nice format? Is it pleasant? Is it very shouty and you're dreadful, you haven't done this, that or the other? Or is it trying to persuade people to change a behaviour? Is it full of jargon, or is it written in really good plain language? And what formats? Is it in a different format to just a letter? Do we do it through a text message, or do we offer it as for those who are blind? Is there a way of them being able to do that through a function on their phone, so that the letter, I'm jumbling my words a bit, so that they're able to hear that through some sort of AI system, so it's spoken back to them? And then I want you to finally have a little think about your individual role in the organisation, the job that you're currently doing. How do you hear about customers' views? How do you know what the customers think about the services? And how do you feed that back? Is there a way for you, as one individual member of staff, to feed back a customer's compliments? Because that's a good thing, because we need to know what we do well. The challenges, we've done this well, but somebody said, could we have it in blue as well as pink? Oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Or their concerns, and a concern is not the same as a complaint. Sometimes people just tell us stuff because they think we might like to know it. They're not going to make a big fuss, but it's worth having a think about. And I'd really like you to go away and have just to think about what your organisation does at the moment. Right, Lindsay, how is that? That's the end of my webinar. Shall we go through some questions? Would that help?
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Jackie. There's nothing in the chat at the moment, but I'll just give people a chance to digest what you've said and to pop any questions that they might have into the chat now. So really take this opportunity, guys, if you've got any questions to ask Jackie. Maybe some of you might be thinking about doing this as a project for your apprenticeships or something like that. And, Jackie will be, I'm sure, pleased to give you some guidance on what you could look at. Jackie, if you don't mind, while we're just waiting for any questions to come through, can I just give you a bit of a scenario and sort of ask you to give some guidance on that?
Yeah.
a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of people in this room here will be block managers, there'll be housing officers, they will be neighbourhood managers. A lot of people that we work with are working in schemes with older people. Have you got any suggestions on how to just get started as at that level where you are kind of frontline, if you like, you're out there, you're with your customers? If you're in an estate or a neighbourhood or a scheme with very, very little customer engagement at all, how do you get started? You know, what can you do to just sort of put that out there?
This is the hard bit. Remember I said to you, engagement's actually really, really hard. Do you know what starts most people off around engagement is there is a problem. That's what gets most people going. There's a problem here and we need to talk to somebody and we need to sort this out. If on your estate there is a problem or there's going to be a change, perhaps you're about to change a gardening contract or a window cleaning contract, or you're going to change the way that the bins are emptied if you are managing a block, for example. A consultation and just talking to residents, a quick note through the doors. I'm guessing, but you'll tell me, won't you, whether this does or doesn't happen to you. If you are frontline working, you most definitely will be talking to customers on a regular basis. They will be chatting to you about how they feel about the service, how they feel about the landlord. So I think it's really important that you take that as the starting point. You do need to link into the wider engagement framework that the organisation is already operating. So my first point would be go look at the framework your organisation is using. Is there something very specific that's going to happen in your area or your estate or your block that needs the voice of customers? What is it? Who's in charge? And how could you help facilitate? You might be the conduit through which the voice of customers can feed into a wider programme. But for me, that something starts with what's the organisation's ambitions around all of this?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. We've had a question from Kenny in the chat. Jackie, what's your views on modern development customer engagement, which generally don't have a traditional estate office attached to them, and the requirement for residents to go to head office, which might be some distance away?
Oh, makes me twitch, that one. I think my view would be, you know, the only good thing that came out of COVID is that we suddenly realised we could do lots of things virtually. And I think using things like Teams or Zoom or other online portals is a way of being able to engage with customers. WhatsApp Messenger, use digital tools for remote stock or stock that's far away from a head office. You should, if residents have to come to a head office to be engaged, you're not doing engagement. You take the engagement to the residents in a way and at a time that best suits them. So I would always say use digital tools if you can. They're really good and people like them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's plenty of them available, even if they're not always reliable. Like I just got kicked out of this webinar. I don't know if anyone noticed. No, any more questions at all? There's nothing else in the chat, so I'm assuming that people have heard everything that they need to hear. If you're in this webinar, obviously you've got my email address as part of the setup, so if you do think of any questions, I'm sure Jackie won't mind me passing on any questions that come in afterwards, and if I can answer them myself, I will do, of course. And most of you that are here will have a VSC here at Learning Curve Group, so obviously you can share those questions with your coach as well. Can I just say a huge thank you to you, Jackie, our speaker, and a massive thank you to everyone who has joined us today. If you are doing an apprenticeship, don't forget to log today's webinar on your off the job log. If you're not doing an apprenticeship, it is great CPD, so add it to your logs. That includes my staff that are here. I see you all. Jackie, again, thank you very much. Lots of lovely thank you messages in the chat as well, so thanks everyone for your feedback for Jackie. Everyone seems to have really enjoyed it, Jackie, so thank you ever so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.